take a look at nParticles. So n meaning nucleus. Once again, I want to be in the FX menu set. And then you can see here nParticles. And if I come down here to create options, I'm going to go ahead and tear this off. And I'm going to look at all these different types of particles. Okay, so if I start with a point particle and come up here to nParticles, and if I go to create emitter and then move this emitter up and hit play, you can see the emitter is basically the starting point and it's emitting the particles, whatever particle I choose. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to move this emitter over, and then I'm going to choose a different type of particle, and I'm going to go to create emitter. I'm going to move this emitter up. Okay, so that's the point emitter. This is the ball emitter. Now I'm going to go here, and I'm going to create another emitter. This is going to be the cloud emitter. The next one's going to be thick cloud. And then the last one will be water. Okay, so we're just going to kind of compare all of these. There we go. And now if I rewind and hit play, okay, there we go. So interesting, we can look at all of these. So the point particles, just like they say, it's just a single point, okay, it's similar to like salt or something like that. The ball particles, well, they're like balls like in a ball pit. Okay, they're going to collide with one another. I can see that the cloud particles, both of them are not affected by gravity, and the gravity is once again built into the nucleus of all of them, but you can see they just kind of respond a little bit differently. And the last one here, the water particles, maybe they look exactly like the ball particles, but they actually, when we look at them a little bit closer, will allow it to kind of stack inside of one another, kind of like water, and they're not so kind of rigid like these ball particles. Okay, so that's just kind of a look at the different types of particles. Once again, point, ball, cloud, thick cloud, and then water. So I'm going to hit stop and rewind, and I'm just going to go File, New Scene, don't save, and let's take a look at some of these. So maybe I'll start with the ball particle. So I'm going to go to that, and then I'll go up here. Once again, if you don't have that tore off, you can just always go here. And then I'll go to create emitter. I'm just going to raise this up, hit play, and that's what it looks like. Now remember, these are connected to the nucleus. So I can see that right here, there's the nucleus. And we know that on the nucleus, if I come down here, I can say U is plane. So let's see what happens there. Okay, cool. So it looks like it's kind of a bunch of marbles spilling out. And the fact that they're colliding with one another is significant. I mean, that's incredible that the computer can kind of handle all that information so quickly. And we can actually do this. I can go to Create, Polygon, Sphere. Let's say if this was like, I don't know, some cereal or something. So I'm just going to make like a cereal bowl. I'm going to cut off the top of this. And I'll go to nCloth, Create Passive Collider. Now if I rewind and hit play, okay, great. You can see that the particles are now colliding with the cereal bowl. And they don't fill up all the way because you can see my timeline is only 120 frames. I'm going to hit stop and rewind. I'm going to extend my timeline to be 1,000 frames. Now if I rewind and hit play, there we go. I can see that it will eventually fill up the bowl. Okay, and they're stacking on to one another. So I'm just going to kind of let that fill up a little bit. And let's say if I wanted this to be full, you'll notice that if I hit stop and rewind, it's going to be empty again. So here's kind of a cool trick. I'm just going to go ahead and let it play. I'll let it fill up. And after it's full, I'm going to say, hey, let's have it that at its new starting point. Okay, so I'm going to let it fill up a little bit. Now I'll go ahead and hit stop. Then I can select the particles. Okay, and then I'll go up here to nParticles. Let me see. I believe it's here. under fields and solvers, initial state set for selected. Fields and solvers, initial state set for selected. Now if I rewind, that is my initial state. But it looks weird that these particles are up here, so if I hit play, I can actually do this. Now if I rewind, I don't need more particles to be in the scene, so I'm actually going to select my emitter and delete it. Okay. Now if I hit play, the rest of those will fall, and they'll come to a rest. I'll wait for them to come to a rest. Okay. Now I'm going to select the particles again and say initial state set for selected. Now if I rewind, that is my starting point. Okay, you notice I'm on frame 1. The cool thing here is what I could do is I could go and do my interactive playback. So if I go into my fields and solvers, interactive playback, now I can kind of go like this. And you can see how awesome that is. I feel like it's really, I could even kind of push this around. And you can see how that just kind of responds really accurately, very quickly. And you can see that I can push this, through the bottom, but the particles are not going to fall beneath the floor there. If I push it fast, they're really going to have an effect. Okay. Now if I hit stop and rewind, you can see that the particles know to start in that position. So if I wanted it there, I'd have to undo, get this back. Now if I rewind and hit play, there they are. And now I can kind of move this. Now realize you're not going to be able to rotate that unless you do the interactive playback. So it's kind of a cool way you can make this quite a mess, right? Without having to clean it up. Awesome. Very, very cool. Now, you might be saying, well, these particles are very limited, like as far as would I ever need particles that color, that look like that? Well, realize that in the particles themselves, so if I select the particles, in the attribute editor, you can change a lot of things about the particles. For example, the particle size we could change. I could go down to the color. Here's the shading. And you can see that I could change the color of the particles. I could make them all one color if I wanted to, right? I could even delete that one, and I could get kind of creative with it, whatever I want. This is just kind of the default color to get us started. And there's a lot of stuff that you can adjust with the particles. Now, I'm not going to get into every single setting, of course, but I just want you to realize that you can kind of poke around in here and change a lot of the attributes of the particle to make it fit what you want. And there is actually a way that you can actually replace. You can have the particles be something else. So if I do this instancer, I could have it, I could model some Lucky Charm marshmallows, if you will, and replace that in there and make it very specific. So really cool. This is just kind of starting off. If I wanted another something, so let's say if I wanted some salt, I could maybe make a, let's see here, maybe a sphere. Okay, and I'm going to just delete a few faces here. Well, let's see. Maybe if I think about like kind of a salt and pepper shaker, I could select, let's see. I'm going to select a few vertices. So if I select kind of every other vertex, I'm going to think about this as kind of like my holes where I'm going to let's say those are my holes in my salt and pepper shaker. And with those selected, I could say, switch this to point because that looks more like salt. And then I could say emit from object. Okay. Now, if I rewind and hit play, I can see that, hey, I've got salt coming out from my salt and pepper shaker. Or we could say sugar, right? If you're putting sugar on your cereal, I don't know if that's a good idea or not. But if I go here, I'll do interactive playback. And now you can see I can kind of move that, and I can kind of adjust and add that to my other particles, okay? And if you're saying, well, that's too much salt or sugar coming out, realize that each thing has, we have to think about it in terms of its particle and its emitter. So if I open up the plus sign next to that, I can see here's the emitter for the salt shaker. And if I go to the emitter tab, I can see that it's doing 100 particles per second. So maybe I dump this down to like 25, rewind it, and now maybe I do the interactive playback. And you can see there's significantly a lot less salt than it was before. Okay, so just kind of give us a starting point of these particles.